Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Galucki. Welcome to the 549th Imagine Greater Buffalo program and our 171st YouTube Imagine Buffalo program, hosted by our wonderful Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted and your video turned off. If you have a question or comment, please type it into the chat box and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation as time allows. We are recording this program so you can watch it again later on the Downtown Central Library's Facebook page and YouTube channels. And please, we hope you share the link with others. Now, on to our featured speaker, Alan Davis, president of Friends of Griffins Mills. Alan has spent years focused on historical preservation and public education at Griffins Mills, a small hamlet located in the town of Aurora, New York, first settled in 1806. Griffins Mills was a center of anti-slavery activism in Erie County, and the Buffalo chapter of the Anti-Slavery Society began at Griffins Mills Presbyterian Church. Alan is clerk at the Griffins Mills Presbyterian Church today and was interested in the history of the church and the hamlet. He has helped promote the history and heritage through historical programs and advocacy. In order to expand and preserve this historical legacy, he organized and recently incorporated the Friends of Griffins Mills, soon to be a 501c3. Now, with that, gives me great pleasure to welcome Alan Davis to the Imagine program. Alan, take it away.
All right. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to move right to my slideshow here. So let me share my screen. All right. Well, thanks for the great introduction and welcome everyone. We'll move right into the program here. First, I want to make sure everyone knows where Griffins Mills is. So here's a Western New York map. Here's Orchard Park. Here's East Aurora. There's Griffins Mills. Let me get a little closer here. Here's East Aurora again. You leave out of East Aurora through Mill Road, and there's Griffins Mills right along the Cazenovia Creek. And from Orchard Park, 240, again to Mill Road, and there's Griffins Mills. So in the early 1800s, people were moving into the area. I'm going to throw a few dates at you. In 1792, the Holland Land Company purchased all the land west of the Genesee River. In 1803, Jabez Warren surveyed the Middle Road, which is actually Route 20A now. That Middle Road was called that because it separated the upper half of the Western New York from the lower half. Jabez Warren then in 1804 settled in what is now the Aurora Village. In 1805, the Holland Land Company divided the land that they purchased into 4 towns. The town of Willink, where we're located, includes the future towns of Aurora, Wales, Holland, and Colden. In 1806, Abram Smith and his son Humphrey buy the mill site on Cazenovia Creek here. By 1810, they've built a dam and a mill. In 1812, Obadiah Griffin, along with his sons Robert and James, purchased the mill from the Smiths, and that's where the hamlet of Griffins Mills got its name. Meanwhile, when people started moving in, what do they need? Well, they need a church, since it provides spiritual support and a social connection for the residents. So on August 18th, 1810, Reverend John Spencer organized the West Aurora Church with 10 charter members. I want to tell you a little bit about John Spencer. He was a Revolutionary War veteran who moved his family to Sheridan, which is down between Silver Creek and Fredonia, and started a farm. He also received a stipend from the Northern Associated Presbytery to travel around and start churches. He's credited with organizing 28 churches, but also helped found another 30. So almost 50 churches in a little over 10 years. So you can imagine how quickly people are moving into the area. Anyways, our church was his third in Western New York. Portland and Westfield were before, and they are also still active churches. I wanted to point out here's a couple little clearer pictures. You can see horse stalls back here, and there's a one-room schoolhouse back there. Now, this picture was taken in 1908, but that was an active schoolhouse back at that time. I'll be mentioning that a little later, but a few more dates to throw at you. In 1830, the church appointed a delegate to the Buffalo Presbytery, so there was an affiliation there, even though it was a congregational church. By 1831, they incorporated it as the West Aurora Congregational Society. The church building you see here was dedicated in August 17th, 1832. I don't have any record of what was here earlier, but I did find mention of a fire that destroyed volume 1 of the church records. They did transcribe it and rewrote as much as possible into volume 2, which we still have. So where did the anti-slavery sentiment begin? Well, a good place to start is with William Lloyd Garrison. William Lloyd Garrison, born in 1805 in Newburyport, Massachusetts. Later in life, he was drawn to the anti-slavery cause. In 1831, he founded the newspaper, The Liberator. By January 1833, had attracted enough followers to organize the New England Anti-Slavery Society. Well, many affiliates began forming, including here at Griffins Mills. The first meetings were held here in 1834, with one of the leading members being Judge Isaac Phelps. Isaac Phelps arrived in Griffins Mills in 1810, bought property in the community, had all 10 children baptized in his church, and lived here for 51 years as an active parishioner, delegate, legislator, and judge. In September of 1835, a constitution containing 12 articles of rules and beliefs were drawn up and signed by 133 members who formally organized the Anti-Slavery Society of West Aurora. So Griffins Mills was the center of anti-slavery activity in Erie County. I heard tell several years later, Isaac Phelps served as vice president of the Erie County Anti-Slavery Society, and also was one of the leaders of the newly formed Liberty Party in Erie County. The Liberty Party was the first anti-slavery political party in the U.S., formed in 1839. In 1844, there was a Liberty Party rally held at the church to support candidates. So in addition to all this, the neighboring areas also supported anti-slavery, especially the Quakers in Orchard Park. This plaque, large plaque, is on the back wall of the church. As you can see, Griffins Mills Church took a stand against slavery, which we're pointing out. Church records in the mid-1800s show that they held an authoritative rule over the moral and social life of the members and openly influenced the larger community. I want to focus on the resolutions, so I've blown it up here for you. At the monthly meeting on November 13th, 1846, Reverend John Stanley opened with prayer and the resolutions were read that the committee had drawn up. And this is strong language here. Whereas we believe that American slavery is, in principle and practice, a violation of every command of the Decalogue, an intolerable disgrace, a horrible curse to our nation, and especially to the church. And whereas we believe the time has fully come with us when silence may be justly construed as an approval of sin. Therefore, and just jumping to this third resolution, that we bid Godspeed to all those who, in accordance with our Savior's golden rule and the royal law of love, are seeking, laboring, and praying for the emancipation of the enslaved and their elevation to the enjoyment of those rights and privileges which the law of God and the gospel of Christ award to every man. Very strong statements there. I do want to mention that these resolutions were submitted to Presbytery December 15th, 1848, and they were never adopted. One other thing that goes obviously along with anti-slavery is the Underground Railroad. As far as the Underground Railroad is concerned, there's always stories and tales, but mostly unsupportable since the activity was secret and illegal. But this was Adam Paul's house that he built in 1820. It's on Mill Road, across from the church, a couple of houses down. He was a church member, a member of the Anti-Slavery Society, and there's a secret room on the second floor, not accessible from that level. In fact, there's a stairway that once went from the basement up to the attic. This is fully documented and photographed by longtime owners Stephanie and Richard McCormick. One of their daughters and husbands lives here now, but it's a really good example of Underground Railroad activity in the area. I just want to mention this for information, additional information on the Underground Railroad in this area. This booklet is a great resource and very interesting, put together with a BOCES grant in 1999 in Orchard Park. It compiles a lot of information from numerous sources. I was able to get a copy of it, scan it, and make copies. It supports some of the things I already knew, plus much more that I didn't, such as this map. It shows Griffins Mills right down here in the bottom with the route to Orchard Park. But then, most of the maps I've seen of routes go up to Buffalo or over to the Niagara River. But this is interesting because it goes over to Woodlawn. Here's an excerpt from the Secrets Along the Niagara that I'm going to read from the book. It says, arrangements were made to ferry them across the river. Sometimes in winter, the sleigh piled high with bags of grain and hiding the slaves underneath drove across the lake at Woodlawn to a gristmill in Windmill Point, Canada. Sarcastically, they say the peculiar thing about these trips is that the grain came back unground. But it definitely shows some alternate routes here for moving slaves. So now let's get to Sojourner Truth. So if you don't know much about her, I suggest you read a book or look her up in Wikipedia. But briefly, she was born into slavery around 1797 in Ulster County, which is south of Albany. In 1826, she escaped with her infant daughter to freedom. Her name at birth was Isabella Baumfree. She gave herself the name Sojourner Truth in 1843. In 1844, she joined a group founded by the abolitionists called the Northampton Association of Education and Industry. There she met William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, David Ruggles, and she started dictating her memoirs to her friend Olive Gilbert. And in 1850, William Lloyd Garrison privately published her book, The Narrative of Sojourner Truth, a Northern Slave. And she began speaking. And at Garrison's suggestion, Truth accompanied the English abolitionist George Thompson on a lecture tour through Western New York and Ohio, so that she might have the opportunity to sell her book at 25 cents a copy. It was on this tour that she lectured at Griffins Mills Church. And why not? It was the center of anti-slavery movement in Western New York. I had a hard time substantiating this, but I have seen it referenced in a few places. Her second visit to Griffins Mills was better recorded in her expanded narratives of Sojourner Truth that was published in 1875. On page 301 of the book, it says, on the first day of the 10th month, she held a meeting at Griffins Mills in the lecture room. That was in 1868, 156 years ago today. Here's another excerpt from the booklet, Secrets Along the Niagara. It says, Truth was a frequent visitor to Western New York. In 1868, she made a circuit of the Quakers and activist groups in Western New York. After visiting Angola, Collins, Gowanda, Kerr's Corners, Bront Center, she spoke in the Orchard Park Meeting House at the end of September, staying with Isaac Baker. Isaac Baker is a famous name in Orchard Park. Then she stayed with P. Paxton, the son-in-law of Isaac Baker, that Friday evening. From Paxton's, she went to Potter's Corners Saturday evening, the 26th, for a large Republican meeting, then stayed with Alfred Moore and his wife for several days. At the Griffins Mills lecture room on October 1st, Reverend Sanford and friends took up a collection for her. Now here's a quote from Sojourner Truth, pretty typical of the way she spoke and preached. Children, who made your skin white? Was it not God? Who made mine black? Was it not the same God? Am I to blame, therefore, because my skin is black? Does it not cast a reproach on our Maker to despise a part of his children because he has been pleased to give them a black skin? Again, another powerful statement there. So the Smithsonian magazine well, I want to say first, Sojourner Truth has been gaining more notoriety recently. The Smithsonian magazine in March, just this past March, published a large article titled, Now the Full Story of Sojourner Truth's Life is Finally Coming to Light. And it was a great article if you can ever get a hold of it or look it up. So there's a number of statues and memorials to her now. Here are some of the significant ones. In Battle Creek, Michigan. Now this was in 1999, and it makes sense that this is one of the earlier ones because this is where she lived out her later years, and she died there. She's buried in Oak Hill Cemetery in Battle Creek. The second one is Ulster County, which is where she was born. That statue was put up in 2022. The third, Florence, Massachusetts. That's where she lived while she was working with the abolitionists, and that was put up in 2023. And the last one, Akron, Ohio, is where she gave her famous Ain't I a Woman speech, and that was just put up this past May 2024. So we, the Friends of Griffins Mills, are exploring additional ways to highlight her impact and presence that she had here. Of course, we have a historic marker we put up in 2018, highlighting the founding of the church and her visit in 1868. So here's a recent picture of our church. We've been organizing and hosting historic programs since 2002. It was over 6 years ago that we organized the Friends of Griffins Mills mainly to coordinate and promote our historic programs. We started with about 20 plus interested parties on our list. And after our community-wide Heritage Day program in 2021 that we did to celebrate the Erie County Bicentennial, our email group has grown to over 70. Our latest news, as Dennis mentioned, is that we formalized our group and organized it as a 501c3, which was incorporated on May 30th, 2024. The first bullet that you see here is our purpose, which isn't much different than before. As far as preserving, sharing history, and historical records, and increasing awareness of Griffins Mills community. But the second purpose, which I'm taking out the legalese, so I'm going to just read the portion of it that I'm referring to. The second half of that was administer any gifts or bequeaths in property of any source without limitation, to expand and improve of the services, materials, equipment, and buildings and properties of the current Griffins Mills Presbyterian Church. So we're helping to ensure the preservation of the property beyond its life as a church, because it is very historic. We also already now own the mill site property that Dennis and Tim Galucki so graciously separated from the rest of the creek side to preserve the site with the remaining foundation that's there. Here's another little current project that we're working on, and comes back to the schoolhouse. That cupola up there. In 1969, the leadership of the church decided to tear the schoolhouse down behind the church. There were others that were against it. So the morning before the bulldozer showed up, Floyd Sprague, his son Terry, and Wes Whaley removed the cupola and hauled it away. So Terry Sprague called me a little over a year ago and asked me if I wanted it. And I said, well, of course I want it. And a couple months ago, he called us over to his home, and lo and behold, fully refurbished. So we just got a permit to build a shed behind the church to display it. So we're many things like that we're working on, have aspirations for, but that pretty much sums up my program here. I do want to mention that for more information, we do have a Wikipedia page on Griffins Mills. We also have a Wikipedia page on the church, and working on developing a improved Facebook page. And there's my contact information. So that's about it. I'll stop sharing here and take it back to
Ellen, I'll take it from there. Nice summary of a wonderful gem in the southern tier, but not that far south. 20 minutes or so from downtown Buffalo, 25, right between Orchard Park and East Aurora, as you pointed out, and loaded with history. One of the interesting things I find, the Catholic Church is going through a difficult time of church closings, and centralize their ownership. Presbyterian Church, on the other hand, allows for the faith community to own the parish. And what I see you doing with your really good handful of loyal folks in the faith community at Griffins Mills is protecting the church ahead of time, rather than waiting for the doors to be closed, let's say down the road or something of that. You're taking an active role. Do you want to comment on that? Because it's a fate for many small churches, I'm sure, and you seem like you're very proactive in taking charge of the situation rather than reacting to it.
Well, I saw what the West Falls Library had done. They were separated from the public library system, and they put together a very similar proposal where the town took over the building and they ran the library through the Friends of West Falls Library. And I looked at that model and I say, I would love to do the same thing. And and I've talked to the town of Aurora about what the potential would be for them to take over our property. And, it's a little early to talk too much about those ideas or discussions, but just kind of planting the seed. So we've done that and kind of structured our Friends of Griffins Mills in the same regard, that if we had a way of helping to maintain the building and using the Friends of Griffins Mills to continue its historic programming. And linking in with the Town of Aurora Historical Office and also the East Aurora Historical Society as potential assistance in helping to promote the history in the town of Aurora.
Yeah. Well, our community between the Erie Canal 200th anniversary coming up next year and America's 250th anniversary in 2026. There's lots of opportunities to show just one part of the Western New York area and the role it played with names that every student has heard through a course of education, K through 12 education. And you suddenly make the connections. Those names are connected with our area and our real places. And that's why I wanted to title this that Sojourner Truth spoke here on October 1st, our anniversary date today, in 1868. She also gave that Ain't I a Woman speech in 1851. And shortly after that is, you're pretty sure through oral tradition, although you can't find it in writing from what I understand, but that she spoke at your church in 1851. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it was more on the way to Ohio that she passed through here. And so the speech was actually after that. But yes, as I mentioned, she was promoting her book and came through this area on her way to Ohio. But that's when she was somewhat accosted by some of the audience there and gave her Ain't I a Woman speech, which is pretty dynamic.
Yeah, and become pretty famous. You can find that on Wikipedia and elsewhere, and I'm sure it was alluded to in the Smithsonian article. All right, let's see if we have some questions from our audience.
We do have a few questions.
Good.
The first question is, were there people who were pro-slavery in the community, perhaps to support agriculture?
Well, I don't really know. I don't believe that there were, there were so many people that were moving in here to start a new life. And Dennis mentioned it briefly, but the Erie Canal was completed in 1825. So that was really supplemented and facilitated the expansion of people into this area. So I think it was people more just coming to start a new life and not necessarily, it was a hard area to be in. It was heavy forest and had to be cleared. I don't think there was really any slavery in the area. So I don't know how many, I think anyone that was for slavery was coming in here to find escaped slaves and return them to the South. That's my impression.
And another question, but I guess you pretty much just answered it. Could you provide more details regarding slavery within New York State?
Well, it was abolished in 1826. So, and most people were freeing their slaves even before that, which wasn't the case. Well, Sojourner Truth actually walked to freedom, but there were others that were being freed prior to 1826. 1826 was pretty much the deadline for no more slavery in New York State.
I know you mentioned about Sojourner Truth coming to Griffins Mills. Did she also come to Buffalo or stop anywhere else in Western New York along the way?
Yeah, I mentioned that in that one reading. All those towns, some of them you don't recognize because the names have changed. I think like Potter's Corners, I think it's, I don't have it in front of me, but I think that's Armour Jewels. Intersection there was Potter's Corners. So all those areas, it's just like Orchard Park wasn't called Orchard Park originally. Those were later names. So a lot of those places you can look them up and even with a post office registry, see what those towns were that she spoke in. But I don't have any record of her being in Buffalo, which may seem odd. I think it's odd also.
Thank you. Dennis, those were all the questions we got from the chat.
Yeah, we're lucky. You had mentioned to me in the town of Aurora, where Griffin Mills is, that they have a town historian. Do you want to just elaborate how beneficial that is to somebody like yourself, who I bet a lot of towns have local folks that like to dig into the town's history, but they don't have a town historian to check in with. What's been your experience along that line, Alan?
Well, he's a great guy, Rob Goller. He's he actually went to East Aurora High School with my daughter, oldest daughter. So I've known him a long time, but a great guy. It started as a part-time position. They had a small office, and then of course they moved their town offices to the what used to be the old fire hall. So it's an expanded office, and he's got displays there, and now he's there at least 2 days a week. And he's a great resource. He helps you find things. He's also a great person to talk with and bounce things off of. A lot of the things that we do and think about doing, I've discussed with him. He helps support us within the town offices and the board. And we also use him as a resource for our programs. He's a great speaker, and he's done a speech on the Underground Railroad at our church. So there's a lot of benefits to having him, and he's been, like I said, he's been a great resource.
Well, a lot of this program is designed to try to connect the dots, and here in Buffalo, we're really making a African American heritage corridor and pointing to the Baptist church that everybody feels was an Underground Railroad stop, but again, lack any physical evidence that it was, other than the oral tradition that says it was. So you have that with houses, the one you pointed to, but even other houses, I think, in Griffins Mills, pretty sure that the stories get handed down that they had housed people on their journey to Canada.
Yeah, there was a house down the on toward the other direction on the same road, on Mill Road there, that they said was a tunnel. And now this was like firsthand knowledge, but it could have been a root cellar. I don't know, because as was pointed out, and even says it in the book I was referring to, the manual that I was referring to, that they were, I mean, digging a tunnel isn't easy around here. You've got shale and slate. And what would the purpose be? Just to go under? Well, they said the tunnel went underneath Mill Road, and when they were doing some road repair in the 1970s, they ran into it. Well, I don't know, just don't know how true that is, or how practical a tunnel under the road to get to the creek would be. And they didn't take the creek anyways. I mean, the creek it dries up in the summer, so it's not a very practical way to get from here to Buffalo. You're better off in like a wagon, like I referred to in the story, where you're hiding them underneath a wagon, taking them into maybe the Michigan Street Baptist Church or whatever, where they spend the night, and then or during the night get taken to the Niagara River to get crossed over into Canada. So tunnels were. There's been a number of stories of tunnels. There's some in East Aurora too that Rob Goller's addressed that are pretty impractical.
One last point, because the War of 1812, your history goes back to that time. Did people flee the city and end up in Griffins Mills anyplace? Are there stories to that effect?
Oh yeah, yes there are. Yes, when the British invaded Buffalo, came down from Fort Niagara and came into Buffalo, they burned the whole village down. I think there was only maybe 1 or 2 buildings that remained at all. And so, yes, people fled, and there's stories of them going out to the Hull House there's a pretty nice story there of, because the daughter and son-in-law lived in Buffalo, and when they heard about the British attacking, they were pretty concerned, but they did get reunited, and that's a great story. Well, same thing in Griffins Mills. There were people coming, and there was a tavern here, and they were sleeping on the tavern. There's some stories of people leaving bread in the oven and going back to try to get it and getting scalped, you know. So
Wow.
yeah, there's a few hand-me-down stories from fleeing Buffalo. But that is, you know, we were founded in 1810, and that's one of the reasons why we are one of the oldest churches around, because any church that was in Buffalo was burned. You know, the first Presbyterian Church of Buffalo was 1813 when they rebuilt it. So, yeah,
And again, the date of the existing church it was built in what year?
1832.
1832, good. All right. Same
Like I
as.
said, I don't really know what was before that.
Yep, you said it may have burned down, given that fire. Ellen, we're gonna leave it there, but that marks the same as the city's incorporation of Buffalo becoming Buffalo, 1832. All right, thank you very much. A great journey down our local history and connecting you with national history right here in Western New York. All right, thanks, Ellen. And
Okay, thank
folks,
you.
good enough. Thank you, folks, for joining us today. We hope you'll join us next week. We're going to start off a little series on civic education. The election boards, I believe, will have a representative here next week. So tune in. We're going to do our part to do the best we can to create a more perfect democracy as we approach election day. So join us then. I'm Dennis Galucki. Be well and good day.